Hello, everybody. Mike King from Profiling Evil. Tonight, I had the opportunity to join Vinnie Politan of CourtTV. I really enjoy getting on with Vinnie. Tonight is really interesting because we're talking about Summer Wells. And while we're talking Summer Wells, we're going to venture north to Wisconsin and talk about Rose Bly, Summer's aunt. Potential homicide cases that are really interesting. Let's watch and we'll get back together in a minute.
In Hawkins County, Tennessee, it's been 1 month since 5-year-old Summer Wells disappeared from her home. Tonight, we look at the latest developments in the investigation and examine the timeline to see what it may reveal.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us here on Closing Arguments. And there's a case out of Tennessee that is extremely puzzling for many, many different reasons. It involves a little 5-year-old girl. Her name is Summer Wells, and it's now been a month since she went missing. There's her picture. An Amber Alert went out. This picture has been plastered all over Tennessee, all over the nation. And people wonder, what happened? How does a little girl just disappear? It doesn't just happen that way. And the other part of all this is where she lives. It's a very remote, rural area. She's not in the middle of a busy town or a suburb where there's house next to house next to house and cars driving by and strangers in the neighborhood. That's not the situation. And that's what makes it even more puzzling. I want you to listen to Candace Wells. This is Summer's mom, who spoke with WJHL in Tennessee, and she spoke about what was happening right before the time that Summer disappeared.
Me and my mother and her were planting flowers, and we went in after we got done washing our hands, and she got a piece of candy from Grandma, and she wanted to go back over and see her brothers, and I said okay, and I walked her all the way over to the porch, and I watched her walk into the kitchen where the boys were watching TV. And I told the boys, I said, watch Summer, I'll be back. And within 2 minutes I came back, and I asked the boys where their sister was, and they said, she went downstairs, Mom, to play with her toys in the playroom. I said, okay. And I yelled downstairs for her a couple times, and I didn't get no answer, which was unusual because usually she always answers me. And so I went down there to check, and she was nowhere in sight. She was just gone.
I don't understand that. I don't understand how that could happen. And it can happen. But I'm trying to figure out that whole timeline that was just laid out. Right? They're planting flowers, Grandma's. It's a normal day. The boys are inside. She sees her walk into the house. The boys say she went downstairs. Then just minutes later, Mom is looking for her and she's gone. She's only 5 years old. What could have happened here? Let's bring in our special guest joining us tonight. In Salt Lake City, Utah, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, and author of Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult, Mike King is with us. Also joining us in Chicago, Illinois, private investigator Erica Morse. Great to see you both. Let's start with the timeline on that moment when she disappears. Mike King, your thoughts about Candace Wells, the way she described what was happening that day, which seemed very, very normal. Mom, Grandma, and everyone's planting flowers, piece of candy, wants to go inside.
You know, you hit on some really important things that touched me, Vinny, and that was, if you're making up a story, a piece of candy doesn't really get entered in and make a lot of sense. The fact that she says the boys saw her and said that they went downstairs, that's something that law enforcement could quickly resolve by talking to those boys. And if you've noticed, the family has actually sent those boys out with other people just to get away from all of the noise going on right now. And they would have had an opportunity, I think, to ask those kids, did you really see her going inside? So that kind of drifts me toward maybe they're telling the truth on all that.
Erica, she went inside, and within minutes, 2 minutes is what Mom said, 2 minutes, she went to go look for her. Now, maybe it wasn't 2 minutes, maybe it's 4 minutes, maybe it's 6 minutes. I don't know. But that's what she said. And she's only 5. You know, she's not running anywhere. Someone would have to be lurking right by the home at that moment and just grab her if someone did.
Correct. You know, in looking at the information on this case, I would have to say that there's actually there are gaps in the timeline. And Mom actually addressed this in an interview, I believe. She said it was a busy day. We were swimming. We made a trip to the pharmacy. We were planting flowers. She went across the street. Then she came back to see the brothers. There are some holes in this timeline from what I can see. And I think that this case is going to be timeline driven. It is a rural area. And so I think that they're going to really have to drill down to the millisecond on this. And yes, having the brothers there is going to be very helpful because they can rule this in or rule this out very quickly as to whether or not the boys saw her. But I think that there are still a lot of unanswered questions here. It is a rural area. Unless someone was lurking or waiting for an opportunity, then I think that this has to start at home. You have to start at home and work your way out.
Yeah, we're looking at all the search crews. People have been out there, an intensive search, but you can see how spread out everything is. It's not a busy road. I mean, many of us live in neighborhoods where there's cars going by every couple minutes. That's not happening here. It's just not happening. Now, Summer's father gave an interview to the Kingsport Times News, and this is what he said. He said, in part, statistically speaking, there's a good chance she's already dead. I hate to think that. I love her with all my heart. If nothing else, I'll see her in the resurrection. As long as I keep the commandments and do what I'm supposed to do, I'll see her. Mike, you know, this is an awful case because it's a 5-year-old girl. I mean, if she wandered off, she could have wandered into the woods or something, and then they just didn't look in the right place, and she just kept going and going. But I would think they would have found something with this massive search that was going on, but maybe not. I don't know. Is that possible that she could have wandered off to a certain extent and then run into trouble, whatever it was?
I think it's absolutely possible, and I really enjoy kind of the discourse that's going on. I really appreciate what Erica just said, because the question becomes, did she get into the house, and can we validate that she was in the house? That would solve one problem. But even if she did get into the house, that doesn't tell us what may have happened after. And she could have wandered into the woods, crawled under a piece of shrubbery. There are so many rivers and creeks around that place that this is a kid who, if you look at the pictures in church and when she's out and about, seems to be pretty darn comfortable taking off on her own and not have a mom and dad holding on to her every minute. And that concerns me a little bit, Vinnie. But boy, she could disappear under a bush in a heartbeat, and people could walk within feet of her and never see her if, in fact, she was walked away and was lost. If she wandered down to the road, then there's a possibility that there was an opportunistic thing where someone grabs her as they're driving by. So you got to keep looking at this thing from that perspective. And I agree with Eric. You can't leave the house till you're comfortable leaving the house. But if those boys put her in there, then you got to somehow come up with a reason for her to leave. And she looks like she's pretty adventuresome.
Erica, Dad was being very realistic. Statistically speaking, there's a good chance she's already dead. What are your thoughts on that issue itself? I mean, if it's an abduction of a child of this age, is that someone that could be abducted to be raised by a different family? Or is that out of the range of that age? What are your thoughts?
I don't think it's outside the range. I think every theory has to be explored. Mom and Dad have taken a lot of heat. This is a case that has actually become a social media nightmare. I don't know how the investigators are managing this. But Dad is a little disconnected, and I'm not sure I'm not sure. There are a lot of, like I said, there are a lot of unanswered questions. She absolutely is of the age where she could be taken and placed with someone else. In that case, I would expect her to keep her first name. It is unusual to retrain a child of the age of 5 to learn a new name. It's a little bit more difficult than, say, 1 or 2 or even 3. So I think that certain characteristics would stay the same, such as a name, eye color. For now, hair color could change. That is a very rural area. To go back to what Mike had said, they could absolutely miss her very, very easily. If they're out doing searches, this is a search that requires a grid search, shoulder to shoulder, with dogs, with horses, if possible, a very difficult terrain to navigate. And I've done those searches, and you can take weeks just to secure an acre or 2. Because you can miss something very easily. I've worked on searches where you have to go back over the same area multiple times. So anything is possible. But again, starting at home, working your way out, really narrowing that timeline down from mom and dad is going to be key in this case.
Let's take a listen to the TBI Special Agent in Charge. TBI is the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
Typically on an Amber Alert, and the ones that I've been involved in since I have been over this program, within a couple of days, we have a tip or a lead or have an idea if they've been abducted, if they may be left into the woods. Somebody saw something that leads us, hopefully, to get an answer to where the child went or if they were taken. We're going to have some tip or lead. And that is the frustrating part for law enforcement in this case and for the public. We will continue to investigate and search for Summer. In the public's eye, there may not be as much media attention given to this case, but that does not mean that we stop what we're doing. We will continue to use every resource we have that we can utilize to try to find Summer.
Mike, what do you think TBI is working on?
Well, I think number one, they have 900 plus leads. I mean, that's a batch of work to do, and the follow up is going to be incredible. I think you got to start over from ground zero, especially if there's a possibility that this child could have just wandered off and is in the woods, because it's likely if she's there and without any kind of support system that she might be deceased at this point. You start watching for birds. You start watching for things that are going to be indicative of a body that needs to be recovered. And they could certainly go back and start retracing those things. They got to find this Toyota truck that they're so concerned about. And Erica talked about the fact that social media has kind of gone crazy with this. There are good and bad of that. And of course, I'm on the dark side now and in this kind of social media world. But things like you're doing tonight, Vinnie, are going to be so important because this family has to keep this little girl in front of the public, and they got to keep looking for her. And somebody will come across her. I always go back to the Elizabeth Smart case. 9 months later, that tyke was found. So you got to keep hope. And I certainly understand the parents feeling some of the feelings they're feeling.
Here's Ronnie Lawson. He's the sheriff in Hawkins County.
Right now, everything is still on the table. We're still trying to find out what happened to Summer. So everybody's still a person of interest. We're still looking at help from the landowners too, to go back and check their trail cameras, their security cameras every day, especially around the time that she disappeared, because we never know who was going to be in that area, and we're still looking for a red Toyota truck. And everything that we do is trying to put a piece of the puzzle together to find Summer. And it may not be something that mean anything to the people. It may mean everything to us.
Erica, is that red Toyota truck a needle in a haystack?
Not necessarily. Authorities have been real quiet. I mean, we're real careful on this. I shouldn't say quiet, but careful to only release what needs to be released, I think, at this time. They always hold something back, and there's a reason they're looking for this. Not every missing child is the subject of an Amber Alert, and that's because specific criteria needs to be met. And so there's enough there for law enforcement to have issued that Amber Alert, and I think that that remains a key factor in this as well. Locating that vehicle is possible. Someone has footage of that vehicle. It's just a matter of finding it.
Now, there's another fact here, and Mike, I want to talk to you about this. Aunt Rose Bly is another family member who went missing years ago. A family that has 2 family members missing. This is unfathomable, and she's still missing. And Mike, I know you took a look at this, and you had some maps you wanted to show us to give us a little more insight into the disappearance of Rose Bly, who would be the aunt in this case.
Yeah, we found it kind of interesting. I mean, this young woman's been gone for 11 years now. And just to orient everyone, the big red point down on the bottom's Tennessee, where Summer's case is going on. If you move up north into Wisconsin, that's where we see what's going on. But if we look specifically at the route that Rose took on that particular day, everything that we have says that she traveled about 34 minutes via Cushing, Wisconsin, and then her vehicle was discovered in a truck parking area in the Grantsburg area. So the question becomes, did she make it to Grantsburg? Did someone take her, abduct her? Is she somewhere along that route? Or was her vehicle dumped in Grantsburg and then she was taken further on? And I guess the thing that I wanted to bring out, if we look at the number of women who are similar to Rose since 2009 when she disappeared, these are the women who are missing or are unidentified bodies that are found in Wisconsin right now. Now, the interesting thing is the more we get to a metropolitan area, obviously the numbers grow higher. But there's nothing up in that northwest corner where Rose was going. And so that kind of makes me think, if we're talking something that's serial related, it's got to be something like a truck driver that's moving long distances and covering lots of ground. But the challenge is massive for law enforcement. And the biggest thing I think, Vinnie, as we kind of looked at this, is that the two are not related. And yet it's one family that's going through an incredible nightmare.
What a nightmare. And again, our thanks, Mike, with your Profiling Evil podcast, putting those maps together for us tonight.
Well, I hope you enjoyed looking into the cases of Summer Wells and Rose Bly to you, that if you know something about them, say something. Reach out to law enforcement and let them know what you know about the case. Wouldn't it be something if we could help bring these people home and bring some closure to the families? I want to thank Vinnie Politan and all of his staff for the opportunity to come on to Court TV on a regular basis. I consider it a real honor. I've learned so much from Vinnie as we've explored cases together. Plus, it's a lot of fun. Well, I hope that you know how much I appreciate you and thank you for your support of Profiling Evil. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.